Let's dive in here. You're looking at the current top 10 of the 2024 draft order. That's through 10 weeks. You see the Bears on top, followed by those 4 teams we just talked about. The Bears then get another pick at 5, Washington rounding out the group. So thankfully, we've got just the crew to answer the questions. Who's going to be that number 1 pick as we welcome in our guys from With the First Pick podcast, Ryan Wilson and Rick Spielman. Gentlemen, let's get to it. Caleb Williams has long been the consensus number 1 overall pick. And Ryan, I'll go to you first. Do you still feel like Caleb will be the first guy taken off the board?
Haley, welcome back to America. I like the reverse Hunger Games conversation. It's almost like the reverse Pete Prisco graveyard situation, too. The more games you win, the further away you are from the tombstones. But here's the thing. We saw that clip of Kyler coming in, and what I was thinking a lot Sunday watching that game in terms of him playing out of structure, I was like, that looks a lot like Caleb Williams. But as we sit here with the Bears having that first overall pick, they're taking Caleb Williams. Now, the conversation is going to be one that's going to be a little more complicated as we get through the process. Rick and I both have talked about Caleb throughout the fall. I love him. He's my QB1. Yes, he plays out of structure like Kyler does, but also that offensive line is not helping. That defense is not helping. He's having to do a lot of this on his own, but he's doing it at such a high level. And Justin Fields hasn't returned yet for the Bears, so you don't know what you have in him. And I think if you're sitting there, and just back in 2017, you passed on Patrick Mahomes to take Mr. Trubisky. I don't think the Bears can allow themselves to do that again. I think you have the first pick, you take Caleb Williams, you don't overthink it, and then you rebuild around your new franchise quarterback.
Let's move on to the number 2 overall pick, because while the reigning Heisman winner has dropped out of the running to repeat, Rick, there was a sprinkle of hope that UNC quarterback Drake May would be considered for that award. He's not necessarily in the Heisman conversation anymore, but he has been playing really well. Do you see him going number 2?
Yeah, I can't believe the Giants wouldn't take him if he's sitting there with Daniel Jones coming off an ACL, and I understand the contract structure, and they may have to keep Daniel Jones for another year, or maybe they tried to trade him. But where the status is of the New York Giants right now, not playing very good football, horrible on the offensive side of the ball, the only way the Giants are going to get back to being relevant is to take a franchise quarterback, and I believe Drake May is that franchise quarterback. And I've said this, I think he shows a lot of traits. I'm not saying he is, but a lot of similar traits to when Trevor Lawrence came out of Clemson.
We also know the value of having
Rick, you said...
Oh, go ahead, Ryan. Nope, you go right ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Haley. I was just going to say, yeah, Rick mentioned the Trevor Lawrence comparison. I'm glad we can't see Rick's face because I've said he's a little bit better version of Daniel Jones. But the point I wanted to make, Haley, is that there's no guarantee that Drake May doesn't go first overall because there are teams that like him as well.
Got it. Yeah, and he's a really good option, too, if you like guys like Daniel Jones, as you just mentioned. Let's switch, though, to the offensive line, because we've seen how much value a healthy and strong offensive line at the professional level is, Ryan. And when you look at the Patriots, they currently have that 3rd overall pick. They need all the help they get. Where can they find some help, especially in the offensive line rankings?
I'm shaking my head because this is worst-case scenario for a Patriots team that's playing so terribly, but they still don't get a quarterback. The consolation prize is you get the best offensive lineman in this class, Noah Fashanu out of Penn State. The bad news is that means you're rolling with Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi or whoever's behind door number 3, and it's probably going to be the person behind door number 3. Ola Fashanu, is an incredibly athletic left tackle. He's still growing into his body. He's not even 21 years old yet. He's only going to get better, and he's already playing at a high level. He had some trouble in the Ohio State game, but he also had flashes of playing well, and those are some of the best dudes he's going to face this fall. And I think he's a guy that fits a huge need in New England because their offensive line, as Mac Jones and or Bailey Zappi can attest, has been dreadful. So fix what you can fix when you have the opportunity, or if you have an opportunity to get a quarterback, if you end up worse than this, you take that quarterback.
I'm sorry, Ryan. I'm still getting over the comparison of Drake May and Daniel Jones. I just can't comprehend that around my thick head right now. But we'll have plenty of time to discuss it on the podcast. What I would say is I understand what that offensive tackle from Penn State is and how he can solidify that offensive line, because that offensive line isn't very good. But when you have a generational player, and I'm talking about Marvin Harrison Jr., and the ability to take him there, he is a way better player at his position than Fashanu is at offensive tackle. Not saying that he's not a very good offensive tackle, he is, but you got a generational receiver that's very unique, and you can't pass on that type of talent.
You know, Rick, I'm so glad that you brought up Marvin Harrison Jr. We don't see wide receivers taken in first overall very often. In fact, the last time they did, I think I was 2 years old. But this is a guy who you mentioned has generational talent. He deserves to break that streak, in my opinion. But, Rick, he's been the clear, obvious best wide receiver in the class. Why does number 4 feel like the best fit for him in this draft?
Well, it doesn't. Number 3 feels like the best fit for him, in my opinion, but I can disagree with Ryan. I get paid to do that. So. But when you watch him on tape, he is so big. He is so athletic. People question his speed. There's no question about his speed. His ability to torque his body and go up and make acrobatic-type catches, he is definitely a number 1 receiver and a generational type talent. And if you put him on reverses, if you put him in jet sweeps, he has the elusiveness and speed to avoid defenders in space. And if you put the ball anywhere up near him, he's going to come down with the ball almost 100% of the time in contested situations. And you talk about a red zone threat. How many touchdowns did he have last week? Throw the ball to the man. He's a generational talent. Don't pass on him. Don't overthink this, Ryan, and take Marvin Harrison Jr. way before number 4.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. And to your point, and this, first of all, I'm still getting over the fact that Haley was 2 years old when Keyshawn Johnson went first overall. I think he's the last wide receiver to be first overall. Number 2, in terms of the Marvin Harrison conversation, if he does go 4 to the Cardinals, the great news for Kyler Murray is that we saw what happened when Stephon Diggs went to Buffalo, got him a number 1 receiver. We saw what happens when the Bengals drafted Jamar Chase, when the Vikings, Rick Spielman, our very own Rick Spielman, drafted Justin Jefferson, what it did to elevate that offense. So that's a fantastic point. Whether we see Marvin go, in this case, to Arizona, I don't know if Marvin can save the Patriots the way they're currently constituted, but it does help whoever the quarterback's going to be, because we're living in a time now where these wide receivers come in and change everything. It's not an issue where you have 2 or 3 wide receivers, you spread the ball around. You have your guy, you throw him the ball, he makes plays because he's better than everyone else. And Marvin Harrison is exactly how Rick described him just a few minutes ago.
Yeah, the good thing about Marvin Harrison Jr. as well is that the wide receiver class this year feels pretty strong, so there are some good options as well if you don't get Marvin. But I want to talk about the guys who are throwing the ball to these wide receivers. Jaden Daniels down at LSU has really had a prolific season in his second year at LSU. And you've also got Michael Penix, who plays for Washington. So when you look at these 2 guys, where do you see them falling, and just how much has this season really impacted where they go in the draft, Ryan?
Jaden Daniels has been so much fun. Rick and I talk about the quarterbacks every week on the podcast, and we just got to Jaden Daniels last week after the Alabama loss. We were both incredibly impressed with 3 quarters of play from Jaden Daniels in that loss, because he wasn't the reason they were losing. He was the reason that game was so close. Then he came back last week and absolutely took it to Florida. It wasn't even close the way he was playing. And we knew he could run, and he's faster than I think even I imagined. But he's showing the ability to improve with his arm, and that's why NFL teams are so intrigued with him. He goes 16 here in this draft. That doesn't even sound that high to me. Michael Penix Jr. isn't the athlete that Jaden Daniels is. I think he's a little more athletic than Rick gives him credit for, but I think he's one of the best deep ball throwers in this class. I think he throws with anticipation as well as anyone in this draft class, and I think he's proven the last 2 years at Washington that he can stay healthy, and I think he has a legit chance to go in the first round as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with Ryan. And Jaden Daniels has made probably the biggest jump out of anyone in this draft class as far as where he was projected to go at the beginning of the season and where he's going now. And when you watch that Florida game, it was like watching, you go to pick your kids up, and Haley, when you were 2 years old, your mom probably went and watched it. You were out playing on the playground with the other kids, and then that teacher was running around and dodging kids, and you couldn't put your hands on them. That's what it looked like when Jaden Daniels was avoiding all of the Florida defenders. It was just a joke. But I think he improved as a passer. He's a tremendous athlete. And I think with all that, some people may be comparing him to a Lamar Jackson type when he came out of Louisville. So this kid has really made a leap. And I think, although I was fighting for maybe J.J. McCarthy, although last week against Michigan, he handed the ball off 250 times in the second half. I think he had 1 pass attempt. But this kid, I think, has a chance to be special the way he's developed.
Ryan, you agree with the Lamar Jackson comparison there?
Yeah, and I'm very cautious about making my comparisons to Rick because he's a hard grader, and I mentioned Lamar last week, and he was actually okay with it. So, yeah, we're on the same page with that, Haley.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate both of your time and your insight. Just because the draft is 6 months away, it's never too early to prepare. You can catch Ryan and Rick on the With the First Pick podcast as they dive into the mock drafts like we just did today, as well as the prospects, position rankings, all the stuff that goes into getting to the 2024 NFL.